This is part 1 of 2 of my story. Hi, my name is Tuesday. I'm 24 years old and I'm here today to talk on behalf of Against Psychiatry and www.againstpsychiatry.com. I'm talking today about psychiatric abuse and the social services industry. Psych meds affected my mind and they damaged my memory. I can remember my life, but I can't remember who I was. As a kid, I grew up in a dysfunctional, abusive family. I never knew my mother. My dad left with me and my sisters when I was 2 years old. I went to juvenile hall for stealing food to feed my sisters. On top of it, I was a habitual runaway. I was given probation. I kept on running away. At some point, I was put into juvenile hall, and then after that, I was put into a group home. From the first day I was in the group home, I was told I needed meds. They told me that everybody was on meds. All the other girls in the group home were fat and sluggish. When I first met them, they would show me pictures of themselves from before they went into the group home, before they gained all the weight. They asked why I didn't want to be on meds. Didn't I want to be like the other girls there? We were forced to go to NA. Prior to going into the group home, I had only smoked weed and maybe drunk a couple of times. But still, I was automatically considered an addict. While I was in the group home, I had a miscarriage, but I wasn't allowed to take painkillers. They were told at the hospital not to give me painkillers because they said I was in a group home and the group home was for addicts, for people with drug problems. One of my friends at that time in the group home started giving me heroin to help with the pain. I got a psychiatric evaluation soon after that, and I was labeled bipolar because I was upset over the miscarriage, and they tried to force meds on me. At this point, I ran away. I went to the East Bay and I immediately tried to get my shit together. I got a job, I got my own place. Unfortunately, I told people about the bipolar label. Immediately, I was ostracized and targeted for sexual abuse. After a certain point, I couldn't deal with it anymore. I tracked down my mom. I had never really known her before and I visited her. She had been electroshocked, heavily drugged to erase her memories of having been abused by her father and her family, running away with a black man to rebel, and having kids, me and my sisters, that she never knew. She felt uncomfortable with me bringing up her past and asked me to leave. I ended up back on the streets again. I got addicted to drugs, mainly heroin for the first time. Got addicted to abusive relationships. But after a certain point, I went to rehab on my own because I didn't want to be dependent on drugs, much less anything else. I wanted true independence in my life. In rehab, I was put on heavy psychiatric drugs. I was told that everybody there was on drugs and everybody was on antipsychotics, but we were not told that. We were told that they were to help us sleep at night, to get through the post-acute withdrawal symptoms. We were also told that we needed a whole list of psych meds to replace the brain chemicals that had been depleted by illegal drug use. Psychiatric drugs cause bad physical and psychological reactions. I questioned taking psych meds when I was there. I didn't really understand it at first. And I was told to work a good program, I had to take the medication I was prescribed. And to me, I felt like that was blackmail. For someone who was trying to get their life together, who wanted to get clean and didn't know how to do it. To trust them and to be told that to work a good program and for this to work, that I had to take a whole shitload of psych meds. That's emotional blackmail. I got into a housing program in Portland for homeless youth at a place called Outside In. Almost everybody in the housing at the time was on psych meds or was prescribed psych meds and didn't take them. We were told, and I have been told by many organizations since then, that being homeless equaled being mentally ill. And so automatically, being homeless equated being on psych meds. We were labeled mentally ill and drugged because we had abusive families, or we didn't have families because we were young and had nowhere to go. We wanted to get a helping hand to become self-sufficient, but instead got drugs, which they used to make us confused and dependent. It would have been almost impossible to work and go to school on all those drugs. We were used as guinea pigs. We were rapidly placed on different drugs so that medical students could interview us and ask questions like, how does this make you feel? Not to help us, but to make us case studies. In less than a 1-year period, I was put on Ativan, Trazodone, Celexa, Lexapro, Tegretol, Trileptal, Zyprexa, Risperidol, Depakote, Seroquel, Neurontin, rapidly one after another. Drugs made me feel terrible. I became suicidal for the first time in my life. I overdosed on my Seroquel in a suicide attempt. After being released from the hospital, I was kicked out of my housing. I ended up in a homeless shelter where I was given a drug that they were supposed to regularly monitor my blood through draws to make sure it wasn't poisoning me, but they failed to do those tests. A little after a week, I was having heavily auditory hallucinations, and I was brought into the psych ward. I was there for 3 weeks. I was placed on Zyprexa and Ativan. After that, I got into another housing program with my friend Ame, who was also kicked out of the outside-in housing. Both of us were placed on abnormally large amounts of Zyprexa. I watched Ame deteriorate mentally right before my eyes. I myself was gaining a pound a day on Zyprexa, and so was Ame. I was sluggish and slug-like. Ame and I became obsessed with food and would steal food on binges. It definitely wasn't normal. I found out that our counselor Sam with this housing program was having sex with Ame, who was 19 but at that point had regressed to the level of a child mentally. I tried to call Sam out on his shit and he started threatening to kick me out of the program. I honestly don't believe he would have had relations with Ame normally if he hadn't been under the influence of psych meds. I went above Sam's head and managed to get into another part of the program where I had my own apartment. I started researching all the meds they put us on and I realized that they had lied to us about the side effects. I tried to warn Ame and turn him on to all this information, but he didn't listen to me. Sam was totally for him taking all these drugs. Sam turned him against me, claiming that I was lazy and didn't want to get off the streets. We stopped talking because Sam told Ame that I was trying to drag him into my own relapse mode. I stopped taking the meds, but I didn't tell anyone because I knew that I would get in trouble. Eventually, they figured out that I had stopped taking them because I didn't seem like a zombie, and threatened to have me arrested and/or have me forcibly medicated for my own good. I was afraid to answer my door because I thought they would come and get me. They started visiting me more than usual. I was convinced they'd bring the police with them. Actually, I'm pretty sure they did a couple of times, and I just pretended not to be home. Although I was off the meds, at that point I still wasn't completely sure who was right, me or them. I got back in touch with my sister again, who had just been prescribed large amounts of Depakote and her hair was falling out. She had several bald patches and began to compulsively kick passers-by on the street. I asked her why she was kicking people. She told me that she had to. I had never seen her like this before, and it was at that moment that I decided I would never again take psych meds. At a certain point, I got physically ill and ended up in the hospital for a while. I made friends with a nutritionist who worked at the university hospital, and I started to research the connections between mental illness and nutrition on my own, and realized that medication was not the answer. When I got released from the hospital and went back to my place, I got picked up for an old warrant and ended up back in jail. I was forced to take amitriptyline and Seroquel against my will because when they asked me about my history during the intake in jail, I had admitted to being put into the psych ward before for the past suicide attempt, and I had told them about my past mental health history. The drugs caused me to hear a constant roaring sound in my head like a distant crowd all the time. I would get dizzy spells, and I was lethargic. I just laid in bed staring at the ceiling, and I was in jail for months. When they released me, that was the end of the medication. They didn't taper me off, they just dropped me. I didn't sleep for several weeks after that. When I got out of jail, I was told my housing had been discontinued for non-compliance. Sam had quit his job also while I was in jail to avoid getting in trouble. I was told the only way I could get my housing back was to take psych meds and be closely monitored. This is the end of part 1 of my 2-part story. To hear the rest, go to part 2. For more information, please go to www.againstpsychiatry.com.